Wilson's demands. The American President Woodrow Wilson represented US interests at the Paris Peace Conference. Wilson was an idealist who believed he had found the key to preventing regional conflicts from escalating into large scale wars. His solution was the League of Nations, which he envisioned as a forum where nations could come together to resolve disputes peacefully through dialogue and diplomacy. When Wilson arrived in France in December 1918, he was greeted by many as a hero, with large crowds gathering in the streets to welcome him and cheering his name. The United States had been largely untouched by the devastation of the war, which had taken place far from its shores. This physical and emotional distance from the conflict shaped what President Wilson and the American delegation sought from the peace settlement. Unlike France, it was not a priority for the US to see Germany severely punished or fully disarmed. The United States entered the war relatively late and suffered significantly fewer casualties than Britain or France. Around 1.4 million American soldiers saw combat, with major US military operations beginning in early 1918. Of these soldiers, approximately 53,000 were killed in action, while 63,000 US troops died from illness, many from the Spanish flu. These total deaths represent only about 1 in every 1,000 of the US population at the time. The US emerged from World War I as the world's leading economic power. While much of Europe had been devastated by the conflict, the disruption actually allowed the US to expand its influence in global trade and gain a foothold in European markets. This economic strength contributed to the post-war economic boom in the US. As a result, the US had little incentive to demand heavy reparations from Germany, unlike its European allies who faced an immense financial burden. Much of Wilson's focus at the Paris Peace Conference was not on punishing Germany, but on promoting his broader vision for a new world order. He believed it was America's responsibility to help resolve Europe's problems and secure a just peace that would prevent future wars. Wilson argued that harsh punishment of Germany would be counterproductive, likely to create resentment, instability, and a desire for revenge. Imposing large reparations, he believed, would only undermine Germany's economic recovery and endanger the hopes of a lasting peace. On January 8, 1918, President Wilson delivered a speech to the US Congress outlining his vision for a lasting peace. His proposals, later known as the 14 Points, included principles such as no secret treaties, freedom of the seas, free trade, and self-determination. Many of these ideas would prove contentious to Britain and France. Most importantly for Wilson, Point 14 called for the creation of a League of Nations to ensure international cooperation and prevent future conflicts. Within his 14 points, Wilson championed self-determination, believing that small nations should be free to shape their own futures. However, he underestimated the complex mix of nationalities within the former empires of Eastern Europe. In keeping with his principle of self-determination, Wilson wanted to avoid colonial gains for the colonial powers of Britain and France. Colonies having a say in their own future was his fifth point of the 14. When evaluating the demands of the Big Three, Wilson's were considered the most liberal and least harsh on Germany. However, his demands did not fully take into account the devastating effects of the war on the peoples of Britain and France. The details of Wilson's desire for a League of Nations and the details of the 14 points are important in order to answer many of the exam questions related to the Big Three.